Okay, today we are going to make a fairly simple Python script that will allow us to have people add users to our Windows computer. It will do this through a little conversation of question and answer, and it will make it simpler for them rather than having to do it through the command prompt or something like PowerShell. As you can see right now, I do have the command prompt open. I'm going to switch over to a Python program called idle. The first thing we need to do is create a new file. In order to do that, I'm going to bring it over so that we can all see what I'm doing. And from here, we need to import a few things. That means bringing in modules that will allow us to utilize certain features. So for what I'm going to do today, I'm going to need the subprocess, the operating system or OS, and the sys or system module. Those are pretty common, but it is important to spell them all correctly. And I do see that I've misspelled subprocess there. Notice that I have all of them separated with a comma. Otherwise, I would have to write import and the module name on separate lines each time. For the second line, we need something called password box, but we need to import it from a very specific module. So I'm going to say from EasyGUI import password box. Now, EasyGUI isn't something that is already installed, at least for me, on Windows. So I need to go over to my command prompt, type python-m pip install. Pip is an option within Windows, and EasyGUI, which is what I want to install. And I did mean install. Looks like I only put one L in there instead of two. So let's add that, and it is successfully installed. While Windows is not case sensitive, you obviously do need to type the correct command. So let's go back over to what we were working on. And I'm actually going to save this before I forget, because right now it's untitled, and even if it was completed, it wouldn't run. So let's bring this over just a little bit so that you can see more of it. I'm actually going to save it on my desktop, and we're going to call it local users. As you can see, I do have another program there. I'll be taking code from that throughout it. I'll also be copying my comments over so that others know what it is I was trying to do. As I said, those two lines were just importing some modules we'll need. The next thing we need is a print statement to essentially greet our user. Now I'm going to use a little trick here with a triple quote. That will allow me to spread my string over multiple lines. This greeting could be just about anything you wanted it to. I happen to be a fan of Star Wars, so I usually fall to C3PO as my personality when I do stuff like this. Going to try to talk and type at the same time here. And understand that they'd like to add some. And again, since I've reached the end of the window here, I can just hit enter and the string will continue. And this will print out whatever I put in there, so it's important that you have it typed correctly. And I see that I ran out of room there. You with this task. Now by ending it with another triple quote, that will close out my string. And idle is good enough. You saw when I put that closed parenthesis in there, it showed me what it was connecting to. That is something that is fairly important. I'm going to bring in my comment from before. At this point, because I know that I'm going to be creating a loop later on, I want to create a couple of variables. So I'm going to say count equals int, which is Python's command for integer, but it's going to be taken from user input. Now I have two open parentheses that will have to be closed out. I'm going to ask them, how many users are we creating today? And since I only used one quote, I only need to close it with one quote. But watch as I close with the parenthesis. It went over to each one. Give me a moment to grab my comment for this. And since I'm also going to use another variable with a number in it, I'm going to create total here and tell it that it equals 0. Since I haven't used text there, that will automatically create it as an integer or an int. Python is smart enough to do that. If I was to say total equals school, it would do it as a string. But in this case, we've told it exactly what it needs. Now, I want to create a group for all these users. I'm going to also do this from input. So I'm going to say group name, which is going to be the variable, equals input. And from here, I'm going to, again, use the trick with the triple quotes. You could have this say whatever you want to. I'm going to kind of stick to what I have pre-written before this video. And no, not van, can. And I'm working with a smaller window here. Find each other. All right, at that point, I can close it out. And we saw that it worked that way. Actually, I wasn't done with my statement, though if I simply come back over, I can work right within it. All right, now we can come down to the next line. And I'm going to grab my comment real quick. It's always important to document what we're doing. Now, since we imported the sub process, but we didn't import the individual commands one by one, whenever we want to use something in sub process, we have to call it. So we have to say sub process dot run. Now, had I done like I did right here and said something more along the lines of from sub process import run, I could just use run here. But what we're going to do is start with an open parenthesis and an open bracket so that we can pass it commands that we would use in command prompt if we were creating something. Each command must be within quotes. It must be separated by a comma, and it must be spelled correctly, of course. Now, we're going to create a group from the variable that we had before, group name. I don't put that in quotes because it's a variable. I do have to still separate it with a comma. And for the last command that will be there is add, but it has the / in it. I'm going to close out the commands I'm running there with a closing bracket, But I'm also going to put a comma and put in another little command here. Check equals true. That must be capitalized for it to work. But what that's going to do is when it runs, it's going to check that and make sure it ran correctly. That it didn't have some sort of an error in it. Which is good, because sometimes that can actually help you find what's going on. Now we've got the group name set, and we know how many users we're creating. So what I'm going to do is start a while loop. And I'm going to tell it that while total does not equal, that's what the exclamation point and equal will be, count, colon. Now you'll notice that I didn't start at the beginning of the line. Python works with indentation versus curly braces, as you might have seen in other languages. However, since I'm going to put in a comment, I'm going to tab back over, come down, and then come in there. It indents 4 spaces or 1 tab each time you have a colon, and we go from there. Now, we want to get some information from the user. Well, I'm going to say first name equals input and ask them. Now, if I had left that space there, it would put it in the sentence. I don't want a space at the beginning. What is the first name of the user you'd like to create? These aren't too long, so I'm not going to worry about going off screen. Now again, I'm going to paste in my comment, which should bring me all right, let's see what I did here. Let's go home. There we go. That should get me to where I wanted to be. All right, now again, I have to come back over. Say middle name equals input. Quote, what is their middle name? And now not everyone has a middle name, so if they don't have one, kindly press enter. Again, we're trying to talk a little bit like 3PO here. And it is just how he would speak. So now I'm going to go grab my comment real quick. Paste it in. Come over and surprise, we're going to ask for the last name. It will be equal to input from the user. Also, may I know their last name? And question mark, close parenthesis. I'm actually going to go back to each of these and put a little space at the end of each quote, simply so it will look a little bit better. And it's a good thing I went back there, because evidently I had fat-fingered something and caused it to delete my closing parenthesis and actual quote up there. So I'm not sure how we got it to work, but we'll need the comment to go with the last name. All right, we're back here. Looks like the video got cut a little bit, so we're going to pick up from the last name. Now that we have all the variables put together, we are going to be able to create the username. So we're going to say username equals And we're going to use the variables to do that. We're going to say first name, and we're going to tell it basically to just use the first letter of it. And we're going to use the plus sign so that we concatenate or put together those with the last name. So if it was John Smith, it would become J. Smith. Grab my documentation from over here. Paste that in. Come over. We can do the same thing for full name. But in this case, we're going to use what's called a formatted string or an F string so that I can have it be a little bit neater and tell it that it's going to be first name, middle name, and last name. That way I don't have to put quoted spaces in between all of my variables and make it look messy. Basically just gives you a little more functionality. Now, most of your accounts are going to want a password. This is where, if you remember, we imported up here at the top. I'm going to scroll up a little bit. We had told it from EasyGUI import password box. So that in this case, I can just say password is equal to password box. You keep seeing it light up certain colors. Pass is a keyword. And we're going to do it with a string. And what password box will do is it will help obscure it when we type it in. Normally, you would use a secure string, but some of these programs don't do well with it, and when they print it back out, they echo the actual password. So that's why we're diverting it in this fashion. Now, you'll notice that I'm going to put a space there before I make my quote. That's because when I do this, I want to have a space before the full name is there. I don't, however, need one before the question mark, but I like to have one after. Just, again, makes it look a little bit more pleasing to the eyes. Grab my documentation. Drop that in. And most users will want to have a description of some kind. So the description will come from user input. Quote, would you like to tell me a little about, and again, we're going to use a space there, and full name. Doesn't really matter if there's a space before or after the plus sign to concatenate or put these together, but I like to put it there. And I'm also going to say, well, if they don't want to, simply press enter. And back up a little bit, grab my documentation here for my comment. And I'm going to bring this down since we're starting to run out of real estate. And now that we've got a lot of our variables here, we're going to do, again, sub process dot run. And in this case, we'll be able to pass it more of the commands, just like if we were using the command prompt. They have to be separated with a comma. And add is a command that you would often use. Now we're going to need to use some more of those formatted strings. In this case, it's not just so that it will look more appealing, but because we need to put a variable into the string, and we need the program to understand that it is a variable. Otherwise, if I had just done this as a string instead of formatted, the command comment would be exactly equal to open curly brace, the word description, and a close curly brace. Obviously, that's not what we want. So we want to be sure that we do it correctly. As I think I mentioned before, double or single quotes, it's a matter of preference. I happen to like it that way. I can't type full name that way because it won't take it. We have to stick to the commands that are there. Where I do want to type it that way is how I spelled my variable. And from there, we're going to close that out. And as before, no, you gotta spell it right. Now see true changes color there. And in this case, I actually have 2 comments to put in so that they know why we're saying, okay, check true every time. All right. And give me one more minute. I hit the wrong key. There we go. And we're going to do sub process again. And I think I mentioned if I had done from sub process import run, I could just do run each time here. But we didn't know at the beginning what we were going to need, so I just brought the whole toolbox with me, if you will. Now this time we're going to call local group, not net user. But they still have to be in quotes, and we're going to call that command on the variable group name so that it brings up so that it is doing this to the group that the person named. Now, we want to add the username that we're working on at the moment to that particular group. Close out our commands. As always, check true. And go from there. Now, if you remember at the beginning, we had total and count. Now, what I just did here was because total was 0, I'm telling this right now that total is equal to total plus 1. I could type that out. This is just a little bit of shorthand. Without this here, this loop would run forever because the variable count comes from when we ask the user, okay, how many users are we creating today? So if they said 1 and total is equal to 0, 1 doesn't equal 0, which up here at the top we said that, while these two are not equal, keep going. What we're doing here is adding 1 to total. So if they had said 1, and then we add 1 to 0, 1 is equal to 1, the loop would exit. Otherwise, they'd just be here all day creating this. Now, I'm going to cheat a little bit here, and I keep doing that. You can't do print in capital and have it work out. I want to be able to say something and have a little bit of a banner above and below it. All right. The reason that I went that way with the print statement is I don't know exactly how many equal signs I need to get down here. And rather than having to count them all, it was easier to do that. Just like it is much easier to paste that down there than it is to have to go and type it all over again. There is some documentation for that. Now that we're out of the while loop, we can work from over here because Python works, as I said, via indentations and not through like curly braces and stuff like some of these other languages do. But we're going to do subprocess.run and net user. No, I apologize. Net local group name. So again, we're calling that same group that we created earlier. And what this command will do is print out that group name at the top and a list of its members, which will allow the person using this program to see that yes, we did create the group, we did put the users in it, and in turn we did in fact create that user, because you can't add a user that doesn't exist to a group. So now let's say that the user wanted a little more information about some of these new people, just to make sure that all their work wasn't in vain. So we're going to create something called answer, say that it's equal to input. We're going to ask them a question and say, would you like to see the details of any of these? And I gotta be able to type today. Users. And I'm going to say yes or no. And question mark. Close that out. Grab my documentation. All right. And now we're going to create another while loop. And we're going to say while answer, I'm going to type it right, is equal to. So just like we could say is not equal to before, this means that it has to be exactly that answer. I could have had it make the answer from the user and change it so they were all either upper or lowercase. That way, if they answered with an uppercase Y, it wouldn't cause a problem, but I didn't want to get that fancy with it. So we're going to say name equals input. And please enter their username from the list of group members. So we've already shown them the usernames, and we're going to ask them to do that. And I'm just a fan of having the first letter capitalized when I can. Let's put in our comment for that. So we're going to go sub process.run, and as before, it will be net user, in this case name, because we want to give it what the user put in, and check equals true. All right, here we are for part 3. So we just told it we want to see the information for that user. I'm going to grab my documentation for that line and scroll us down a little bit. So again, this is using the net user command with the variable name, which they gave up here. So what it should do is print out the information in a long list for that user. And if you remember, we are running this based on the while loop above, which is being controlled by the answer variable. Now, if we never change that, we would just sit here going around and around all day long. But we're going to say answer equals input. And we're going to ask them, would you like to see the details of any more of these users? And again, yes or no. Now, as before, if I wanted to, we could deal with the whole minefield of uppercase, lowercase, but we didn't want to get fancy with it. So, go to there. And now I'm going to start my farewell portion of this within the program and print. And I'm going to use \n. That just creates a new line. It'll make it so that it's not right up against whatever happened last. And let's see, got to be able to type pleasure. Again, we're speaking kind of like 3PO here. All right, now you'll notice that I put a space in there. I'm going to concatenate again, and you cannot concatenate an integer with a string. The language doesn't allow it. But I can tell it to change the variable count to a string by putting str there at the beginning. So we're going to put that in there. And again, we want a space over here. Otherwise, it would say these one users, if the number was one, all looking like one word. And we don't want it to be messy like that. I probably could get away with this on one line, but it wasn't how I chose to do it. And again, speaking like 3PO, I happen to be James, so we'll say Master James of my performance today. You could have it say pretty much anything you wanted in those quotations. I just happen to be a big Star Wars fan. And there's my documentation for that. All right, now what we're going to do is hit save. All right, I'm going to pause the video here for a moment and bring this up on a bigger screen so that we can see what's going on. So I will be right back. Okay, we've got the command prompt up here. I've got my code hiding in the background. I've saved it on the top, which we are in the desktop here. So what I'm going to do is type Python, and we called it look, and since we have spaces in there, we have to use quotes, local users.py. All right. Now you'll notice that because we put those on separate lines, that it does that. I don't like how that looks. So you know what I'm going to do? We're going to use a Control-C and exit out of that, give it CLS to clear that up. And from here, I'm going to jump back over to our code. Now that we've got the whole window to work with here, let's sort this out a little bit better. I think this was really the only place that we decided to do it, but no, we actually did it down here too. So let's, again, it's all about how it looks and making sure it's kind of appealing to the eyes. I believe the rest of it we kind of kept on, yeah, on one line. So let's try that again. We're going to save it with that. And I'm going to go up. Try this again. That looks a little bit better. In reality, you could have it, but I won't want to risk it going off the screen. So we're going to tell it we're creating 3 users today. All right. I'm a big fan of Star Wars. And actually, you know what? With this here, let's try to fix that. All right. Go up to group name. We want that in there. And again, that's why I had a space after most of my quotations. So as you can see, even though you create a program, you can always kind of go through it. So CLS, just to get that out of the way. And again, we'll tell it 3. Yeah, see, now I'm not on top. So Star Wars. Oh, now an error occurred. So it took the variable, but it's not really working. So let's see where our problem exists here. All right, we're back. Well, the problem was that we weren't in an elevated form of command prompt. You'll notice this now says Administrator Command Prompt and Windows System 32. So what we're going to do to make things a little bit easier is we're going to go to the path port. This trick won't work if you select desktop over here. Now we have where we'd like to go. Let's cut that out just so that we know we have it. CD for change directory. All right, now, and since we changed, it's not going to carry over our commands. So, once again, Python, and it's going to be local users.py, enter. All right, we want to create 3 users. And as you can see, it was completed successfully. All right, what is the first name of the user you'd like to create? All right, Luke. I don't know that he has a middle name. Skywalker. And it wants to know what I want for a password for him. I haven't set any parameters as to what it needs to be. I'm going to pick something simple here. As you can see, you can't see the password. Would you like to tell me a little about Luke Skywalker? There is an extra space here. I wasn't able to fix that. That's where his middle name would go. So let's say he's a Jedi Knight. All right. Now, description is not defined. I'd fat fingered that one. So, first thing I want to do is go net local group Star Wars. Let's see if this works. Delete is what I want. Because otherwise, when we go to run this in a minute, it's going to give us a problem. So, and let's see. Description should be, and right there. It's amazing what one letter will do. So, hopefully we can get it to run on this time through. Let's go CLS just to go from there. And we want to run that again. We're going to create 3. Star Wars, Luke. Again, we don't know that he has a middle name. And he's a Jedi Knight. All right. Han, and even though I don't know that he has a middle name, let's just say it's Benjamin. Solo. He's a pilot. All right. And Leia, as far as we know, she doesn't have a middle name. Organa. And I'm not going to say anything about her. All right. At that point, we see here's your new group and a list of its members. The name of the group is Star Wars. We didn't give it any sort of a comment about that. And we can see that H Solo, L Organa, and L Skywalker were created. Would you like to see details of any of these users? I'm going to say yes. All right, H Solo. This is not case sensitive, so I won't really get in trouble here. All right. Come back up. We can see username, full name, a comment about him, and a lot of other information. Just to see how some of the others looked, let's go yes, L Skywalker. And we got to type it correctly. And again, if we come up here, Luke Skywalker, he has no middle name, but he's a Jedi Knight. And just for the heck of it, let's go L Organa. Now, for her, we didn't give any sort of a comment, so there won't be one there. Now, just to make sure that we can get out of this loop, I'm just going to put sure for the heck of it. Now, since it wasn't yes, it exited out. And it gave, if you notice, it put a new line in here with that \n that we gave it. It's been a pleasure helping you add these 3 users today. I do hope you'll inform Master James of my performance today. I kind of repeated today, but that's something that can easily be fixed in the string. I hope that you found these videos informative and that you'll give me a like and share them with others. Have a great day.